Hello and welcome to our special event entitled The Keys to Co-Creation between Japanese multinational companies and Israeli deep tech startups, bringing together Japan and Israel through innovation. If you have not yet done so, please make sure to select the language channel you would like to listen to below in the Zoom settings, English or Japanese. I would like to give the floor to Mr. Ryo Mizuno from ABeam Consulting to present our event.
Thank you, Ilana. さて、お時間になりましたので、ABeam コンサルティング株式会社およびスタートアップネーションセントラルの共催によるオンラインイベント、イスラエルディープテックスタートアップとの競争実現の鍵を開始させていただきます。本日は年末のご多忙の時期にもかかわらず、多くの方にご参加いただき、大変嬉しく思います。2時間という長丁場になりますが、ぜひ最後までお楽しみください。はじめに、本日のイベントのご参加方法についてご案内いたします。本イベントは日本語のセッション、英語のセッションがございます。本ウェビナー、Zoom の日英同時通訳にて開催しておりますので、ご参加の皆様はご視聴したい言語を Zoom のアプリ画面右下より、日本語または英語を選択の上ご視聴ください。また、QA ボタンより、イベント中いつでもご質問ができるようになっております。お時間の都合上、すべてのご質問へのご回答は難しいところもございますが、気になる点などございましたら、ぜひご質問いただければと思います。この方へお聞きしたいなどございましたら、ぜひともご希望の質問相手の方もご明記の上、投稿いただければと思います。ご質問に関しても、日本語、英語いずれでも問題ございません。なお、本日のイベントに関しては、イベント運営のため、録画をさせていただきますが、アーカイブとしての展開は予定しておりませんので、あらかじめご了承ください。それでは、私、ABeam コンサルティング株式会社でデジタルテクノロジービジネスユニット、DXI セクターシニアコンサルタントの水野より、本日のアジェンダおよびスピーカーのご紹介をさせていただきます。まず、イベントの開催にあたっていろいろとサポートいただきました、イスラエル大使館経済部様より、経済担当講師兼経済貿易ミッション代表のダニエル・コルバー様によるオープニングトークを配信いたします。その後、本日のイベントを共催いたしましたスタートアップネーションセントラルの事業開発バイスプレジデント、ジェレミー氏より、イスラエルのディープテックエコシステムの全体像およびディープテック領域におけるイスラエルスタートアップと日系企業の競争事例をご紹介いただきます。スタートアップネーションセントラルはイスラエル現地のスタートアップ企業に対しグローバル展開を支援する NPO 団体です。そして本日のメインセッションとなるパネルディスカッションに移ります。現在、オミクロン株が急速に拡大しておりますが、昨年より続くコロナ禍の影響で海外出張が難しい状況が続いているかと思います。こうした中で、イスラエル現地とのリアルタイムで接続するイベントとして、本日は現地で数々のイノベーション活動を推進されている日系企業様を代表して3社よりゲストとしてご参加いただいております。まず、武田イスラエルのジェネラルマネージャー、アリエ・クレイマー様。続いて、三井住友海上火災保険株式会社デジタル戦略部部長兼グローバルデジタルハブマネジメントイスラエルのマネージングダイレクター飯島健二様、東芝ユーロップイスラエルデベロップメントオフィスジェネラルマネージャーの森博文様にパネラーとしてご参加いただき、イスラエル企業との競争のポイントについてディスカッションいただきます。セッションの冒頭にてゲストの皆様より自己紹介とともに各社様での取り組みについてご紹介いただく予定です。パネルディスカッションの後半ではご参加の皆様からのご質問もいくつかピックアップさせていただき、ゲストの方へお伺いできればと考えておりますので、ご質問のほどお待ちしております。また、パネルディスカッションの後、イスラエルのディープテック領域で今まさに勢いのあるスタートアップ3社の代表よりそれぞれの取り組みやスタートアップ側から見た日系企業との競争のポイントについてピッチ形式でプレゼンテーションをいただきます。本日は Wi-Fi システムなどの半導体を製造するセレノコミュニケーションズ、エッジデバイス向け AI プロセッサーを提供するヘイロー、人の疾病に関するモデルを開発する Cytoreason に参加いただいております。最後に、弊社の執行役員プリンシパルデジタルテクノロジービジネスユニット DXI セクター長より、コンサルティング会社から見た競争のポイントについてのプレゼンテーションを実施させていただきます。その後、イベントのラップアップと Q&A の時間をご用意しております。それでは早速内容の方に入ってまいりたいと思います。ここからはイスラエル現地で司会を務めるSNC ストラテジックパートナーシップマネージャーのイラーナ氏にマイクをお返ししたいと思います。イラーナ、I pass the microphone to you.
It's great to see everyone joining us today for both Israel and Japan. My name is Ilana Sherrington-Hoffman, and I am a Strategic Partnerships Manager for Startup Nation Central. And I am excited to present this event, a joint and warm partnership between Startup Nation Central, a non-profit organization that builds bridges around the world to Israeli innovation, and ABeam, a leading consulting company from Japan. To start us off, it is my pleasure to invite Daniel Kolbal, Minister for Economic Affairs in the Embassy of Israel in Japan, to give a few words of welcome.
Minasan, konnichiwa. And hello, good morning to those in Israel, good afternoon to those in Japan, participants, speakers, co-organizers. It's a great pleasure to launch this event today, featuring advanced, innovative, deep tech technologies from Israel. Today, we at the Economic and Trade Mission of Israel and Japan have the opportunities to support this important webinar organized by ABeam and Startup Nation Central that features some of what Israel has to offer in the deep tech field. Now, digital transformation is being accelerated everywhere, including Israel and Japan. Automation, sensing, robotics, AI, IoT, etc. They're making the world safer and more sustainable, and we invite all the Japanese companies to connect with Israel and develop strategic partnerships. The relations between Japan and Israel have never been stronger. This is also reflected in the sharp increase of investments from Japan flowing into Israeli high-tech, growing year by year with a new record set in 2021. And growing number of Japanese companies setting up offices in Israel and also vice versa. Today we'll have the pleasure of listening to representatives of three major Japanese companies that have offices in Israel: Ari-san from Takeda, Mori-san from Toshiba, and Ijima-san from Mitsui Sumitomo Insurance, the latest addition of Japanese companies in Israel. By the way, I had the pleasure of inviting President and CEO of MSI to an event we organized, took place last week. He gave a fantastic, fascinating presentation about MSI's strategic decision to open a digital innovation hub in Israel and to be able to develop more partnerships with Israeli startups. More than ever before, the world is facing global challenges, such as infectious diseases, aging population, climate change, etc. These are times of challenges, but also of opportunities. And as everyone understands, for global challenges, we need to be working together. Now, Israel and Japan are both modern countries. Both nations have ancient history and unique characteristics. But when it comes to the structure of our economy, our cultures, our way of thinking, I believe we complement each other in the best possible way. Each side is bringing its strength to the table, and working together is win-win for everyone. I'd like to thank ABeam and Startup Nation Central for initiating and organizing this event and for their continued efforts to build bridges between Israel and Japan, and especially between Japanese corporations and Israeli startups. I believe many of the viewers today are familiar with us, the Economic and Trade Mission of Israel in Japan, but for those who are not, I invite you to join our mailing list, our many events. We're part of the Israeli Ministry of Economy and Industry, also part of the Embassy of Israel in Japan. And with our offices in Tokyo and Osaka, and together with our many partners, we are working hard.
Words of welcome. And thank you kindly, Daniel, for those warm words of welcome. And now to business. Israel is known to the world as the startup nation, despite its size and many challenges. To explain to you a bit more about why that is and what unique offerings distinguish Israel from other ecosystems of innovation around the world is Jeremy Kletzkin, VP of Business Development at Startup Nation Central. Jeremy, over to you.
Hi, and good evening to Japan. And so we've been partnering with ABeam for over 5 years, always with great success. And so what we are doing tonight is to, in Israel and in Japan, is to continue this partnership and to get more great outcomes. So I will give you a general overview of the Israeli ecosystem of innovations with a bit of some numbers, and also focusing on deep tech. So Israel is a very small country. We have only 9.5 million people. The workforce in the high tech is a small bit of it. It's less than 10% of the people. However, we bring some huge impact to the world in terms of innovation. This is just an overview in numbers of what is happening today in Israel. We have more than 6,500 tech companies, startups, and also a couple of very big companies focusing on creating technology to the world. Israel, as we saw, is not a market for those companies. We are #1 in R&D expenditure per capita, and we have 1 startup per 1,400 people in Israel, which is the highest density in the world. We're going to focus a bit on why deep tech is that evolved in Israel, and access to funding is, of course, one of the reasons. On this slide, you can also see that per capita access to funding to startups is very, very high in Israel. So let's start to develop a bit this idea. We have technologies for almost all of the verticals in Israel. It's interesting to see that Israel is very different from Japanese when they innovate. In Israel, we start with the technology. In many cases, there is very little expertise in verticals, but since technologies are today the same for all the verticals, we acquire data, we process data in Israel, and this is needed in all the sectors, then deep tech is applied across the board. What we can see on this slide, and of course this is not exhaustive, that all of those sectors are also very connected. There is a lot of cross-fertilization between those sectors. Something that also is not really happening in Japan. When people work in automotive, they will mostly spend their career in that field. In Israel, we have engineers moving from one sector to another. We have people coming with their very different way of thoughts, starting on in healthcare, and then the engineers will move to fintech and finishing in a video game, and they will bring their creativity, and when you don't see the box, it's easier to think outside of the box. This is what we have in Israel. However, at some point, the connections to the reality is back by working with the companies around the world. Here on this slide, you can see a couple of examples of success stories, inventions from Israeli technologies that touch the world. You have Checkpoint, they invented the firewall, maybe Weiss, you know Weiss, the dripping irrigations, the flash drives was invented in Israel, etc. So the interesting thing on these slides is to see that the big proportion of the Israeli startups are not brands like in Japan. We are mostly B2B tech driven, and in most of the case, deep tech driven startups. And those startups actually need a partner to reach the world. Of course, M Systems was acquired by SanDisk and could be the success that we know today. Mobileye was acquired by Intel and could become the success of today, et cetera, et cetera. So we are a B2B nation. And this is what makes Israel so different from the other ecosystems if you are familiar with the Silicon Valley, with European ecosystem, with Singapore or Shanghai, or all of those others that actually sit in the middle of large markets. In Israel, we don't have the markets, but we have the technology. And so you can see the proportion of the investments before COVID on this slide. We will talk about after COVID later in the presentation. But as you can see, the proportion of B2B is very high. It's interesting to see that Japan is also the #1 country in terms of corporate. So you have 50 corporates in the top 500 in the world, which is 10% of the largest companies in the world. So you have the best match here on the picture with B2B tech company on one side and the largest corporates of the world on the other side. This is why with ABeam, we consider this as being the best complementarity ecosystems possible. As you can see, over the years, the participation rate in investment rounds of corporate large multinationals is on the rise because there is a lot of money. So only the strategic, smart money that opens markets is really getting the best opportunities in Israel. So you need to be extremely proactive and partnering in order to get good deals in terms of investments in Israel. Now, let's talk about irrationality, because those numbers are crazy. Let's talk about it. As we thought, of course, we anticipated that with COVID, the investments will stop rising as fast as it was in the past. But it was the opposite. The opposite, and the reason is, as you can see, with almost $25 billion, actually we crossed the $25 billion early December of investments in Israel. This actually shows that the value that is created by Israeli companies and the deep tech startups here is very real. And one of the reasons is that most of the technologies and most of the sectors actually were positively affected by the changes of COVID. Most of the sectors keep on growing faster, not only for the traditional challenges, of course, the healthcare and the working remotely, but also for all of the other challenges that large companies around the world are facing to reduce their dependency, understand better their processes, to monitor better their supply chains and their logistics and everything around their operation. Their core business is transformed, and this is what the Israeli startups are helping those companies to do. As you can see, we're also #1 in the world in terms of R&D money invested per capita. That shows that Israel is extremely proactive to keep on growing with this innovation sector. Few numbers. As you can see, there is a lot of VC funds. We spoke about it earlier. Access to funding is very healthy in Israel. So in most of the cases, it's not about bringing more money as much as it's bringing your challenges and becoming clients of companies in Israel, or even telling them what you need, because they will be able to raise money in Israel if, as a Japanese corporate, you come and tell them what you need. There's a lot of programs for startups, earlier startups, and many verticals, many sectors. There is the full range of companies that are available in Israel. You have a lot of R&D centers of multinationals in Israel, and the universities are extremely active as well in Israel, and they are part of this ecosystem with transfer of technology offices that are generating, in many cases, lots of revenues for the university. So let's talk about 2021 in terms of record breaking. We have today 53 unicorns in Israel, and there were like 33 new ones just in 2021. So we more than doubled the amount of unicorns in Israel this year. And if you want to be part of the show, if you want to enjoy this trend, you need to be active and work with Israel today. As you can see, those unicorns raised a bit less than half of the money that was raised. And the deep tech sectors that are the most benefiting from these new unicorns are fintech, security, enterprise IT, and data infrastructure. We, of course, have companies tonight that will talk about those sectors and show you a few examples of those success stories. We have more and more R&D centers in Israel, and we know that Japanese corporates around the world, when they open presence in different ecosystems around the world, they are doing it with the very traditional two ways, which is investing in LP and opening R&D centers. In Israel, what you can see is that over the years, there were less and less new R&D centers and more what we call open innovation. It means less people on the ground, but more power to work with many, many startups. So one single person or team of 5 can work with tens, if not hundreds, of startups in Israel. And we will have some examples in the panel with the Japanese corporates that joined us for this event. So this transformation of model is important to understand because this is how you can best leverage Israeli innovation. This is not by hiring engineers in Israel, but working with the startups. Not by competing against the startup for the talent, but by working with the startups to leverage their potential. Of course, there are reasons of why Japan and Israel did not work that much in the past. Israel works much more with Germany, with the US, with other countries that also are like Japan, global leaders in very similar industries. And one of the big reasons is mentality gaps. Distance is a reason, but it's never a good reason to work with Israel because everybody is far from Israel. The reason Japan needs to improve and Israelis needs to improve, it's because we need to bridge this gap of working mentalities and getting to know each other much better. In Israel, we know we take risk as granted, and people actually have a different perception of failure. And that's this different perception of failure that enables those startups to create and fail and create and fail. And we all know that in Japan, this is not the same story. It's much harder to fail and much harder to justify a failure. So we do believe that by learning about each other's, on one side, more learning in Japan, learning about taking more risk with innovation because the success worth the risk. And in Israel, to better understand execution and learn better about the market because Japan is a leader in executing and product design. So we do believe that this is a bridge that we need to gap. As you can see on this graph, which shows the difference of business mentalities between Japanese and Israelis, we in Israel, at the top left, are the extreme opposite of Japanese in being much more emotionally expressive and confrontational. But this is our way of working, and this is very important during your journey of leveraging Israeli innovation to understand and to better bridge that. And this is why ABeam Consulting has extensive experience in working with Israel, and this is why also at Startup Nation Central, we have also great experience working with Japan. We can help you to bridge that gap. So I'm going to be finished soon. This shows that Israel, on this slide, has a very small market. So if you go to the Silicon Valley, and we know that most of the Japanese corporates have an office in San Francisco, but if you go to Israel, the people that you'll meet, they see you as first priority. When you go and meet with startups in the Silicon Valley and in other large markets, they're always focused on their own markets. In the Silicon Valley, they will focus on US first and Japan afterwards. In Israel, you are our first priority. If you work with us, the startups will consider you as top first class and most important clients. So this is a very big difference of attention that you can get if you want to make some deals in Israel. So a few words, just like 2 minutes of words about Startup Nation Central, we have a website called the Startup Nation Finder. It's really the mapping, the database of every single startup in Israel and VCs and all the data that I showed on this presentation. You can go there. It's free. It's open. It's a website. Just Google Startup Nation Finder. Of course, we also host with our partners at ABeam many, many delegations from Japan and over the world. We can host you. During COVID, this happens online like this event, but we can give specific attention, one company at a time. Every single corporate in Japan that is in this call is eligible to get services from us in partnership with ABeam. So please talk to ABeam if you want to connect with Israel directly and get special attention on your topics. That's all. I'm done with my presentation. Thank you for your attention and looking forward to see you, even in Israel, but maybe in Japan. It doesn't change. It's okay on both sides. Thank you very much.
I've seen a lot of kids in Kenya carrying gallons of water on their back 10 miles from school, which is unbelievable.
And then it struck me, why not to make a bicycle out of cardboard?
The cost would be nothing. Everybody told us it's impossible. So our approach was, if somebody tells us it's impossible, we're in the right way. It's waterproof, fireproof, zero maintenance, and a fun thing to write.
There's a reason why Israeli startups have become such a global phenomenon. Just about every technology company across the globe is either buying an Israeli startup or opening an R&D center there. There are more Israeli companies listed on the NASDAQ than all of Japan, Korea, and India combined, a country smaller than the size of the state of New Jersey.
It's all a result of need. In order to survive in this country, there was a need of an enormously strong entrepreneurial spirit to find a certain path into the future.
We're in a race against time to save the planet. The developing world tends to burn a lot of diesel. You gotta kick that habit as soon as possible.
I got injured. I became totally paralyzed, chest down. Then I wonder how come a wheelchair is the only solution. So I developed at home an exoskeleton.
Israelis in general are not satisfied. They're always searching for the creative way to figure it out.
Startups are very uncomfortable. Most people, they don't have the willingness to suffer the pain. We do.
Now we're trying to implement the first major solar power plant in Rwanda.
The great challenge was to make the person walk in a natural kind of way, without thinking about the walking.
You know, it doesn't come as a bright light. When you test something or you try something, you have to try to find sparks in the dark.
VA, wounded soldiers, they have started to use the device. Once you see the families that lost hope,
nothing here makes sense.
See their beloved one standing and walking again.
But then the clouds have turned into
You cannot stop the tears.
When they are too optimistic, they are the right type of people.
Right now we supply 10% of Rwanda's energy.
Israel is not only a nation of startups, the entire country is a startup. What the world has been waking up to is that Israel is becoming this laboratory for solving some of the most perplexing problems across the planet.
And now for a little bit of insight into the value that Japanese multinationals can find in the Israeli ecosystem of innovation. With me, I have an esteemed panel of guests representing 3 Japanese multinational corporates with a significant presence here in Israel. And there is no mistake as to why. It is an honor and a privilege to introduce from Mitsui Sumitomo Insurance, Mr. Kenji Iijima. He's the Managing Director of the Global Digital Hub here in Israel and the General Manager of the Digital Strategy Department of Mitsui Sumitomo Insurance Company. It's great to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Liana. So this is the Kenji Iijima from MSI, Mitsui Sumitomo Insurance from Japan. I'm very glad to hear and very pleasure to be here in Tel Aviv. So thank you.
Thank you so much. It's our pleasure. From Takeda, I have Mr. Aryeh Kramer. He's the General Manager of Takeda Israel. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Ilana. My name is Aryeh Kramer and I'm the General Manager and founder of the Israeli affiliate of Takeda Pharmaceutical Company, which is one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world. Happy to be here.
Great, thank you. And from Toshiba, I have Mr. Hiro Muri. He is the General Manager of the Israel Development Office of Toshiba Europe. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for intro, Ilana. I'm Hiro Mori. I'm a General Manager of the Israel Development Office in Toshiba Europe. I'd be happy to share my knowledge and experience today.
Thank you. It's exciting to have all 3 of you. Just a comment for the audience, if you have any questions throughout this panel, please feel free to write them in the chat of the platform, and we will make sure to at least address 1 or 2 of those at the end of this panel. So let's begin with the first question. I think what we really need to do is discuss the drivers of what pulls these Japanese multinationals to come here to Israel. I'll start with you, Kenji, if you wouldn't mind just describing to us, of course, about Mitsui Sumitomo Insurance, but why did you decide to come here to Israel? What is so attractive?
Yeah, sure. We MSI belongs to the MS and AD Insurance Group Holdings. Consists of the various kinds of the insurance-related businesses, and we have expanded the business in more than 50 countries, 50 countries as a group. So we regard that the continuous innovation among the group is the key driving factor to survive and develop the business to make us keep contributing to society. So that's why the exploring and implementing the cutting-edge technology provided by the Israeli startups must be the kind of the most important key factor. So that's why we set up the Global Digital Hub Tel Aviv. It's been lengthy name, named the GDH Tel Aviv in here. So together with the local partner, the Idea Insurance. So by having this facility, we can have the driving force to explore more together with the Israeli ecosystems. So that is the reason we set up this facility here this year. Thank you.
Okay, fantastic, and it's exciting to see all the things you're going to do.
Sure.
I'll give the same question to you, Aryeh. What is the reason that Takeda, was brought here to Israel?
So in 2014, Takeda went into a significant transformation with the ambition to become a global provider of medicine solutions, and with the understanding that with the ambition to become a global partner, there was an understanding that Takeda needs to be in Israel because of the very developed health system in Israel, and because of the strong and well-connected proximity to biotech innovation in health. With this understanding, there was establishment of a local office here, which actually acted as 2 spearheads of penetration. One of them was actually investing in, together with other partners, with the great support of the Israeli Innovation Authority, into a bio-incubator, which actually meant to develop new transformational ideas about biotech and solutions for treatments, new treatments in the fields of Takeda. And the other one was also to become a local player in the local ecosystem of health, when we are actually establishing a strong connection with the key stakeholders. And this is why we understood that Israel is a must-be place to be here. In this sense, since the last 8 years, we invested together with our partners more than $300 million in investing in growing biotech companies and in investing in technology, and we are very satisfied to do so.
That's fantastic to hear. Very exciting news. Hiro, I'm going to give you the same question.
Yep.
Why did you end up here in Israel with Toshiba?
As you may know, Toshiba is a Japanese industrial conglomerate. We have the various types of the business, such as energy generation, social infrastructure system, such as the water treatment, something like that. Also, we have the semiconductor and the system integration business. So to expand our business, collaboration with external partner is essential for Toshiba. So it's gonna be shorten the time to market. So that's the reason we established the innovation office in Tel Aviv in the 2019. So my mission is basically the technology scouting. I'm trying to identify the cutting edge technology and excellent company that could be fit for collaboration with Toshiba. So far, I met over 450 Israeli vendors, and I proceed more than 20 POCs. So now I'm so much satisfied.
That's fantastic to hear. That's great. So let's talk a little bit about these different models of operation that each of these Japanese companies is representing. You know, we spoke in the earlier briefing a little bit about R&D centers, which is the more, I would say, traditional way of opening things. But we're really seeing a growing trend of open innovation, meaning all these different structures and partnerships that are being established, and they are a different type of way to be present here in Israel and still gain the benefit. So can you tell us why you decided to establish a digital hub here in Israel? Why was that the choice, and what kind of benefits have you seen from establishing something like that?
Okay, great question. So we regard that Israel is another heart of the innovation other than the Silicon Valley in the world. So we recognize that there's plenty of the cutting edge technology and the startups that provide all these kind of the solutions. So it's the very essential factor that we continuously make the innovation in the insurance world as well. So we non-life insurer, we just pay the insurance money when something happens. That is the very essential function, but it is not enough to contribute to the society. So how can we prevent the loss or minimize the loss when it occurs, something like that. So all these kind of things must be based on open innovation. So we need to collaborate with the excellent startups here in Israel. So to scouting such technology, it's a bit difficult to just only from Japan to approach to the ecosystem. So I understand that the future of this Israeli ecosystem is everyone knows everyone. So we have to find a way to how can we smoothly and quickly come into the ecosystem. So that's why we established the Global Digital Hub here together with our partner. So by doing so, we can utilize or share all these relationships cultivated by your partner, and we immediately get into this ecosystem. That is the great advantage that we established the joint lab here. So we like to continuously move forward together with the partner to achieve their mutual goals. That is the significant advantage of our Global Digital Hub. That is our thought. Thank you.
Understood. So your digital hub is your way of having your finger on the pulse, right, and really keeping in touch with the ecosystem players. Right. Okay, that's very interesting. Could you tell us why you decided to establish an office, a branch?
Yes, so we understood that Israel is actually very good in generating new ideas, and we thought that by combining those ideas to the structure and processes that Japanese corporates are bringing, this could be a power multiplier. So I would say the key success factor for us was to establish this kind of office in order to generate the connection, and this is why, as you can see, I'm not a Japanese. I'm a pharmaceutical seasoned experienced, and I know the local language and know the local key stakeholders that we are engaging. So while I'm bringing a lot of understanding of our processes of corporates. I'm actually knowing the local arena and understanding. So by joining these kind of forces of creativity together with the processes that large Japanese companies actually bringing, we believe that this is actually delivering significant success. And the focus is how can we leverage local ideas into a global scale-ups. So this is why we started with small partnerships together with the very support, and as Jeremy said, there is a very strong appreciation when you come to the government officials about being a large corporate and generating this kind of additional insights and additional connection is a power multiplier in our success.
Fantastic. So you started smaller until you established the office, and you see this as a model of incorporating local professionals together with the Japanese multinational.
And the fact that there are 350 local headquarters of global corporates actually significantly improves the talents pool that could also be useful for additional endeavors.
Great, thank you. Hiro, can you tell us a little bit about why you decided to have the innovation office here?
As Iijima-san said, we had innovation office in the Silicon Valley as well, but Japan is relatively lower priority, unfortunately. But we came to the partner in Israel, and we did some POC. Our impression to Israeli vendor is very, very positive. Also, the POC results are very nice. We understand Israelis are very supportive for Japanese company. It was very much easier to communicate Israeli vendors. Then we decided to establish the innovation office in 2019 to accelerate open innovation with Israeli vendor and Toshiba.
Okay, great. So it really was your way to accelerate your business propositions, your POCs, you're really being able to be active with the startups on the ground.
Yeah,
exactly. Okay, great. I think something very important that we really need to address here, and we spoke about some cultural differences, and obviously Japan and Israel, very different countries, but despite that fact, there are so many benefits of working together, and maybe even some ways that Japan and Israel complement each other. So my next question is going to be, what would you say is the most important things for a Japanese multinational to consider before coming here to Israel? What kind of challenges are there, and also how did you overcome those?
I see. Okay, it is the very famous story that the notorious Japanese slow decision-making process. So that is the, it's a bit shame, but we have to conquer this issue anyhow. So by establishing the global digital hub here, we can have the keep distance, maybe meaningfully or modestly keep distance from the headquarters, and quickly make a decision together with the Israeli partners. So by utilizing the partners' business environment and the knowledge and the data they have, we can quickly make a POCs here to make a quick decision. And after that, we can prove this technology with the solution can be applied. There's a possibility to can be applied to the Japanese operation or international operation. Then we will move, bring it to the Japan. So by doing so, compare with the everything be done in Japan from the beginning, we can rapidly make a decision and have the necessary data and so on here in Israel. So after then, if we bring it to the Japan, we can much accelerate all these procedures. And also by doing the POC here, we can avoid any kinds of the obstacles or time-consuming factors, such as the very extremely strict security rules, or of course the language barriers and so on. So I believe that the global digital hub here, we can accelerate much more if compared with we just have the similar facility in Japan. So that is their function.
Understood. So your way of overcoming, I would say, the differences in speed of processes is for your presence here to smooth over that transition.
Yeah,
okay, perfect. That's very interesting. Arya, can you tell us a little bit about
what I would like to add for this is that we put a lot of attention in the establishment in order to gain trust between the two sides. Just to defend the Japanese tradition and culture, corporate decision making is slower everywhere. So Israelis know how, Israelis with the relevant knowledge about how to mitigate, how to be very communicative in the beginning in order to make sure that there is a very close understanding what are the processes ahead, are a significant factor in the success. So put a lot of efforts in the beginning in making it very strong and getting the attention also to the local players that you are actually hiring, and also from the Israeli side. Make sure that you are actually very clear in messaging your ways, and this will bring the trust that is actually required in order to establish and to grow the business further. So the mitigation was actually building trust in the beginning, and afterwards allowing the Israelis to enjoy with the fast action that they are very famous of.
Understood. Communication is always key, that's for sure. Hiro, can you tell us about Toshiba?
Yeah, I think there is two types of the culture gap. First one is nationality, as you mentioned. Another is company perspective. So Israel is very aggressive. It's very good fit for the startup mind. But Japanese is basically the conservative. We take a lot of time to make a decision. Meanwhile, for Toshiba case, we have more than 120,000 employees across the globe. So company structure has to be the organized, also the hierarchical one. But Israeli startup is a relatively smaller team. Their decision is very, very quick. So I don't say which is better or worse, but important thing is we have to understand such kind of gap, also that respect each other.
All right, fantastic. It looks like all three of you really see the challenges towards, all of the business, but you have managed in significant ways to overcome them. And I think a common theme would also be the fact that you really did choose to have a presence on the ground. That really is the key to overcoming these challenges and smoothing over the process. We do have a few minutes left, so I'd like to open the floor to ABeam to relay any questions that were asked by the audience in the chat. Over to you, ABeam. We have Lewis Lee joining us from ABeam to ask a few questions that have been asked by the audience.
Hello. Yes, we have two questions. So let me share one. The first question is, let me speak Japanese first. まだまだ海外渡航が戻らない可能性が高いので、そのような状況でどのようにイスラエル企業と関係を築いていけばよいと。So let me say that in English. It says because of the COVID, it would still take time when we will allow to travel to Israel. Do you have any advice for us on how to build relationship with Israeli startup ecosystems remotely?
Great question. We'll start with the same order.
I see. For our case, we are here in Israel, so we have not so much difficulty on that. But still, you are right. The face-to-face meeting is still the important factor during this COVID-19 situation, under the COVID-19 situation. However, if you only the facility in Japan, better to have more discussions through the Zoom or the web meeting. And I think the Israeli startups are very open-minded, so they always welcome this kind of opportunities. So the important point is once we have the web meeting, so followed by what? So the next step is much more important, I think. So and it's my experience that before we start to have the discussion with the Israeli startups, it would be better to set up our minds to what is our next step? We continuously have the web meeting to dig more deeper, or to have the next step, such as to have the NDA or whatsoever. This kind of things here, I think the better to be discussed among your organization. Otherwise, it's like startup, the speed of moving is very, very fast. So it's better to prepare before we have the any kind of a session. That is my comment. Thank you.
Okay, great. And Arya?
I will rely on what Jeremy is actually saying, that the local ecosystem is appreciating significantly any kind of interest coming from the Japanese market. So I think that a lot of vessels could be used in order to leverage this kind of interest. Startup Nation Center could be one vessel. There are additional. You could use already the existing players also to expand other introductions for startups and innovation companies. And let us remind that both Japan and Israel are actually quite sophisticated and advanced in the treatment of COVID. So we can look on the short term with some kind of limitation. But you know, follow-up meetings could be arranged in a short time. So this is also, as my colleague said, very important element in generating the relationship. So don't rely on Zoom, but you can start planning for March coming to Israel.
Absolutely. Yes, and Hiro?
Yeah, I agree that due to the pandemic, it's very hard to come here. But now, video conference tool like a Zoom, it's get the essential tool. It's easy, much easier to set up this kind of web meeting. I think that there are a lot of the local partners to connect the Japanese company and the Israel. Also, Startup Nation Center can help.
Absolutely. We have time for one more question from Luis.
Yes, okay, I have one more question. Let me say that in English first. How do you communicate with startups in your very first meeting with the startups? What is an important message what kind of conversation you have to prepare when you speak to a startup to be successful, to build a successful relationship? 日本語で、イスラエルのスタートアップと協業するときに一番最初に気をつけるメッセージ、どういうメッセージをどのように彼らと、良好なパートナーシップを作っていくために最初のミーティングでどういうメッセージを伝えるかっていうふうに考えるか教えていただけますでしょうか。
Yeah, it is a very difficult question, which we have struggled with. So I think when we start the meeting, as much as possible, we have to disclose or share what is our pain point. Or if the pain point is not so clear enough, then maybe we need to describe what we want to do or what is our ideal situation, these kind of things. So if we just only ask the startups to please show your technology or the solutions, I think it's a bit difficult to explore more together with the startups. So firstly, we have to share what's our purpose and what is some kind of the ideal situation to realize together with startups. These kind of things, they make such an effort before the meeting with the startups is much more important, I think. Thank you.
Great. That's a very important tip. Thank you. Yes.
So my message to startups who are coming to me is that because of the fact that we are a corporate, the idea needs to be very clear and crisp. And I'm expecting them also to, learn about what are the pain points, as my colleague said, of the company and what are the strategic areas that the company is actually looking for. So this is I would say the message that startups should come and to present with, meaning that they are actually looking what is the interest from my perspective and trying to fit the solution to the needs of the company, and this will be increasing the chances of the idea to be accepted and be reviewed.
Absolutely. Yes. Hiro.
Yeah, I think that I always try to involve the business guy from my team, because Japanese company very technology oriented. If we hold a meeting with only technology guy, engineer, my team asks many technical questions, but no output about the business action after the meeting. We have to prepare such kind of team organization attendee. Also, we have to prepare the hypothesis business scheme in advance.
All right, great. So that concludes our questions for now and our panel. I have to say that it's been extremely interesting and insightful to listen to all three of you. You've given 3 different models of operation, 3 different sets of tips and insights of really how Japanese multinationals can come here, engage, partner, and really be part of the Israeli ecosystem in order to gain from it. And I'll say on the other side that the Israeli ecosystem really benefits from your presence here, your knowledge and the expertise, and of course the market that you can supply to the Israeli startups. So really thank you very much for being here today and for sharing with us all of your thoughts. And with that, we'd like to go on to the next segment that we have, a very exciting one. We would like to shine a spotlight on Israeli deep tech startups. Out of many, we have chosen to showcase to you today 3 Israeli startups that have deep tech solutions and are already active in the Japanese market. Starting us off is Lior Weiss. He's the VP of Business Development and Marketing from Soleno Communications. Soleno has had an exciting year with Japan, but I'll leave that for you to hear. So Lior, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ilana, for the introduction. Nice to meet you all. I'll be taking you through the Soleno journey that we went through in the last 15 years. Soleno, in a nutshell, is a Wi-Fi semiconductor company that we started 15 years ago, focusing primarily on the service providers marketplace. Early on, we've innovated the first generations of Wi-Fi to help IPTV service providers to launch the very first IPTV services around the world. You may recall that early Wi-Fi generations were at top speeds of a few megabits per second. And obviously we had to do quite a bit of effort to overcome that challenge and be able to deliver high definition video services over Wi-Fi in homes. Ever since Wi-Fi innovated through various generations, every few years, 3 to 5 years, Wi-Fi is coming up with new industry standards that are evolving the top speeds from a few megabits per second 15 years ago to a few gigabit per second of these days. Obviously, Soleno being a small company, a small startup, we had to differentiate and bring more value to our customers. So in the last few years, we've actually innovated and built on top of Wi-Fi converging sensing technologies on top of connectivity. With this in mind, we are delivering, together with our Wi-Fi chips, also embedded engines for RF sensing and radar sensing technologies to help with the vision of converging connectivity and sensing to various applications around the world. Soleno has about 150 employees. About 2/3 of them are residing in Israel, about 100 strong. And we're a global company delivering our semiconductor chips to over 100 countries and through more than 50 service providers. Those are just few examples of the type of devices that Soleno semiconductor chips have been enabling. Primarily home networking equipment such as broadband routers, extenders, repeaters, set-top boxes, and other type of Wi-Fi solutions. The latest generation of Wi-Fi technology is called Wi-Fi 6 and Wi-Fi 6E. Previous generations of Wi-Fi have steadily improved top speeds, again, from multiple megabits per second to a few gigabit per second in today's standards. However, Wi-Fi 6 really made a big difference. Traditionally, Wi-Fi has been very prevalent in connectivity in the home and consumer electronic devices, and enterprise IT infrastructures. But it never really made the breakthrough into additional verticals that are more mission critical, such as industrial automation, automotive, smart cities, and other type of applications. And Wi-Fi 6, for the first time, embraced very interesting technologies from the cellular 4G and 5G world to make Wi-Fi much more reliable and more robust than it used to be. Wi-Fi is a collision-based technology, and with some of the Wi-Fi 6 new feature sets, reliability and robustness of the signal have improved dramatically. Various features such as multi-user operation, scheduled transmission, and other type of techniques essentially quadrupled the network capacity of Wi-Fi, especially in dense networks. And deployments in dense networks are becoming more and more prevalent, especially because of IoT and cloud-connected devices. So when we're looking at networks of hundreds of devices and dozens of neighboring networks residing nearby each other with lots of interferences, network capacity, reducing overheads is becoming very critical. In addition, some of those feature set improve dramatically latency. In fact, we are seeing an order of magnitude of decreasing latency between previous generations and Wi-Fi and the existing next-gen Wi-Fi 6. Not less important is the addition of Wi-Fi new spectrum, which is called Wi-Fi 6E or Wi-Fi 6 Extended. So last year, regulatory bodies around the world have started to approve new spectrum for Wi-Fi, whereas in the past, Wi-Fi has been operating in the 2.4 and 5 gigahertz bands. With Wi-Fi 6E, the introduction of Wi-Fi operation in 6 to 7 gigahertz became a reality. And that is effectively an addition of additional 1 gigahertz of spectrum to Wi-Fi. And that new, clean, pristine spectrum, of course, contributing further to introduce very reliable Wi-Fi network. And the premise is that those improvements would make Wi-Fi a very prevalent solution for industrial automation, high-speed gaming, and other low latency and mission-critical applications. It also changes quite dramatically the architecture of access point, whereas in previous generation, typical access point included 2 simultaneous radios operating at 2.4 and 5. We're starting to see the new trend towards more premium access point solution encompassing 3 simultaneous radios in them. And Celeno has evolved its architecture accordingly. And with our latest portfolio of Wi-Fi 6E solution, we've condensed into a single package chip 2 simultaneous full-blown access point solution, driving perhaps the most compact and cost-effective access point solution in the industry. But moreover, again, as a small company, we had to innovate further. And we started a few years ago to work on convergence of connectivity and sensing. Understanding the evolution of Internet of Things and cloud-connected devices, it became clear that some of those applications can benefit more data from those endpoint devices. So with that in mind, we included in our Wi-Fi chips 2 important engines that are a breakthrough. One is an RF sensing engine that simultaneously to the connectivity aspect of the chip also collects telemetry and information about what's going on in the RF spectrum around the device, detecting interferences, detecting cellular networks, detecting all those neighboring access points and networks around the device, leading in turn with the proper AI layer to optimize the connectivity experience of the users. And in addition, we've also embedded into our Wi-Fi chips a true active Wi-Fi radar, which is a true breakthrough in technology, enabling sensing of the physical world around the device actually detecting objects, living objects such as humans and pets. So I think this diagram presents well the benefits of such a solution. So in addition to the chip, which delivers Wi-Fi connectivity, the chip is also capable of sensing what's going on around in the spectrum around it, as well as what's going on around in living objects in the physical world around the device, and essentially collecting information about the location of those objects and their Doppler signature. In turn, those Doppler signatures, which are highly correlated to real-life motions of those objects, could be then contextually analyzed to make the understanding about the whereabouts and the motions of some of those objects, such as their position, their postures, maybe gestures, some vital information, and maybe even counting the objects around the device. In turn, those type of Doppler signature analysis could help deliver the telemetry and data for proper AI layers to make those deductions and drive various applications such as safety application, security application, appliances and consumer electronics, operations, and other type of solutions. And of course, some of the benefits of this RF-based technology is privacy, as opposed to cameras and other type of sensing technologies. Also, some of those technologies and data could be then interpreted into even remote medical care or elderly care solution by, for example, detecting falls and driving various safety applications, industrial and smart factory safety applications, and so forth. Lastly, coming to present days, last month, Renesas, a Japanese corporation, have announced that it is to acquire Celeno. Renesas is a semiconductor corporation that started about 20 years ago with the convergence of semiconductor divisions out of Hitachi, NEC, and others. And they are in a market-leading position with top market share in the automotive industry as well as in the microcontroller industry. Given the proliferation of IoT and cloud-connected devices, many multinationals have recognized that Wi-Fi is becoming a very important missing link in their portfolios. Celeno, delivering and excelling in connectivity solutions as well as sensing solution, could help Renesas to deliver more complete solutions into this market space. And we're looking forward for a very successful collaboration with our new parent company. Obviously, Renesas would also benefit from tapping into the Israeli engineering talent, and effectively, Celeno would become the Renesas Development Center in Israel. We're hoping that with this new collaboration and new future, Celeno would be expanding very fast from our traditional service provider market space into additional connectivity verticals, such as in the industrial world and various consumer applications, leveraging on the richer portfolio of Renesas. With that in mind, I thank you very much for listening on the Celeno journey. Thank you very much. Arigato.
Thank you very much to Celeno Communications for presenting your solution to us. That was very interesting to listen to. And also, it was great to hear about the acquisition by Renesas. We are really looking forward to hearing about the benefits of that. You know, there's so much for Japanese multinationals to do here in Israel. And as you can see, a lot is happening with the startups, and we look forward to seeing a lot more examples like that. Next up, we have Liran Bar. He's a Vice President of Business Development from Halo. Halo has a fabulous deep tech solution that can be used across many sectors. So Liran, please tell us more.
Thank you, Ilana, and thank you all. I'm very happy here to present Halo and the technology and the value proposition of Halo to the Japanese market. Halo was established in 2017. We are a young company. We have more than 160 employees by now. The company already worth over 1 billion. As part of our strategic investor, we have NEC from Japan. We have active project with them, and also ABeam for the industrial from Europe. Actually, the first office that we open outside of Tel Aviv is Japan. In Tokyo, we have an office, and we are already engaged with many, many customers in Japan. As a result of that one, we are also working with Macnica as our main distributor in Japan. The product that we develop is actually AI inference chip for running the inference of AI application. And let me share with you more information about that one. The product that we already developed, it's called the Halo 8. The Halo 8 is a very powerful device, a very small, tiny device. It is targeting edge devices where there is a lot of challenges how to run AI applications. It includes 26 tera operation in 8-bit. It is very, very efficient, 3 TOPS per watt. We developed the Halo 8 from the ground. One of the noticeable things is the fact that there is no need for external memory. So for those of you from the semiconductor will able to understand the fact that you don't have external memory, we have end-to-end AI processing inside the chip in a very efficient way. This tiny device is also targeting automotive industry, for example. So there is the certification of the automotive, which we already did. As you can hear about AI and deep learning all over, we are focusing on vision tasks. And you can see here some of the example: pedestrian detection, collision avoidance, and others. And here you can see some example state-of-the-art networks applications that are already running on the Halo 8. From the top right, for example, you can see semantic segmentation from a car. This is full HD resolution, pixel by pixel processing. This is in only 1.7 watt. If you go to the left, you can see multi-person pose estimation people, not a single one that can be in a factory. And you can see other example here, real-time, very high resolution capability that will enable video analytic on a high resolution video stream, which enable you to detect very small objects. As a startup, we have to be very focused. And here you can see some of the main segment that we have. We have the automotive. Until the autonomous will take the level 4 and 5, we can adopt the technology already in ADAS application, smart cities for video analytics, smart home, retail, and industry 4.0. The solution that we provide is very flexible and scalable to address all the requirements from the different segments. What is so unique in the product? Here in a nutshell, we give an example of one of the leaders company called NVIDIA, where you can see on the left side NVIDIA 8GX Xavier, which includes CPU, GPU, and 8 complementary memory. On the other end, you can see the Halo 8, as we mentioned, without any external memory. Therefore, you can see the footprint on the PCB. This is the M.2 module A+E. The size of that one is only 22 by 30, for example. So you can understand the benefit from an area point of view. On the right side, if we compare a classical benchmark like ResNet 50 with the same apple-to-apple comparison, we are able to run the same task at 1.7 watt, while NVIDIA is running the same task at over 30 watt. So you can have the benefits of both the side and the power efficiency. And if we compare the frame per second, the FPS on the left side that you can see, compared to any of the NVIDIA product family, obviously the Halo is superior. Also, if we compare to other leading companies such as Intel and Google, Halo with a 26-tera operation is by far, in terms of performance, better than the Myriad X and the Google Edge TPU. Here we have collaboration, an example of collaboration with Foxconn and also Socionext from Japan. Here you can see a device that is fanless device with a Halo 8 M.2 AI module. It's a fanless device that we plug into existing solutions. So there is a benefit that you do not need to change the hardware. And also we use the Socionext CPU host as a host, and we are able to run multiple camera to process the video analytic on multiple camera. So on one hand, you get the fast time to market. On the other hand, you get the best cost-effective solution. Here are additional companies that we are working, at least those are the public ones that we are talking, edge devices, NVR, camera devices. All of them require AI capabilities. In addition to the hardware, we invested from day one on the software. Actually, the largest team that we have is actually the software. And we provide to our customer and third-party software companies SDK. We call it the Halo Data Flow Compiler. And in a nutshell, without going into the details, we take a trained model and we support TensorFlow and NNX, and eventually it goes through the SDK different pipeline, and eventually we get a binary file that then is uploaded into the device itself in real time. In terms of the business model, we have different options. One is the Halo 8 chip, which is 70 millimeter by 70 millimeter. This is the smallest footprint and also in terms of cost. And for others that already have devices and can be able to connect either M.2 module with different mechanical size keys or mini PCIe, this is a great advantage. Everything is owned by Halo. In addition, when we are talking about a large corporate in Japan, and as we heard in the panel session, we need to think about scalability. To start from a small project maybe and go to different divisions inside the corporate that require a higher throughput. Here you can see example of devices. All of them are fanless devices, integrated 1, 2, 4, or even 8 devices using PCIe card with Halo that enables you up to, from 26 tera operation, up to 200 tops. Here is an example that we have a reference design, and you can go to our website and to get more information. This is an NVR camera reference design, where it uses 8 PoE camera from Axis in that sense. In this fanless device, there are 2 Halo 8 devices M.2, and we are able to run 8 streams end-to-end, where we are running one of the state-of-the-art network. It's YOLO V5, and we are running at full HD resolution at real time, 30 FPS. Available solutions that are available today are not able to run at a full resolution. They are utilizing a full HD resolution, for example, sensor, and they need to downscale the input resolution in order to meet real time. In the case of Halo, you're able to run on the native resolution at a very low power. And my last slide for that one is to give you the value proposition in a nutshell. Obviously, you can go to our website and to learn more. But Halo provides high capacity of 26 tera operation. Typical working is around 2.5 watt. And to do the camera analytic. We have a lot of software, SDK that we provide. This is a complementary. We have a large ecosystem that support existing customers if they don't have the capability of the software. And obviously for the automotive industry, we provide all the certification. And you can see here all the environment and the longevity. So thank you very much all for listening today for Halo. And again, you are welcome to visit our website. We have a developer zone that you can register and to get all the technical information, the performance of the different benchmark, different model zoo that end-to-end gives you an example. And if you have more questions, you are welcome to contact us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to Halo for your presentation. It's incredible how something so small is able to provide so much, and it's a great example of what deep tech really looks like. So we've done 2 startups and we have 1 left for our lineup for today. Our last startup, we're going to have Mr. Eldad Kadari, who is the Senior Account Manager for Cytoreason. Cytoreason has a very important innovation for the healthcare and pharma space. So Eldad, it's over to you.
Thank you very much, Ilana, and thank you for inviting us today to share about the Cytoreason story. So Cytoreason, I'm Eldad Kadari. I've been responsible for the account management function in Cytoreason for the last 3 years. I came from pharmaceuticals, so I've been working for Teva Pharmaceuticals for almost a decade. And when I parted from Teva, I was looking for this startup vibe, and Cytoreason was a great combination between the startup with the deep tech and the ability to influence the pharmaceutical and healthcare industry. So this is very exciting to share with you our story today. So let's talk for a minute about the pharmaceutical industry. The pharmaceutical industry has a problem. It has a lot of problems actually, but one of the biggest problems that it has is that it's not as profitable as it used to be. So developing new drugs today are actually have negative ROI. So for every dollar we spend on R&D investment, we get less than $1 in revenue. So that's a big problem in pharma. And one of the reasons for that is science. You know, all the easy drugs have been made, so now it's up to science to come up with new, better, improved, more personalized drugs. And for that, we need good science. And we in Cytoreason keep talking about the data insight gap. So in the late 90s, we had the genomics revolution, where we cracked the genome. We got a lot of data, 30,000 genes, 200 cell types, and the data starts building up. But our ability to extract actual biological insight from that data is very limited to date. Now, this is not only, you see that more than just in the pharmaceutical industry, you see it in other industries. So you would see a lot of industries adopting the model concept. So let's talk about telecommunications, for instance. So some of us are old enough to remember this type of phone that had no data, just pure point-to-point communication. Then we got our cell phones that collected some data, but we had nothing to do with that data, so it just sat there. And now today, you know, nobody leaves their home without their cell phone. We do everything with our phones, and this is a perfect example of having a model with users' data points to help the user get advice on how to get to what they need to get to. So we took the same concept to biology. So once upon a time, scientists would work with their instruments. They would have a piece of paper and a pencil to record their findings. That was very limited. And I mentioned the genomics revolution, all this data coming in, but what do we do with all that data? So that's what Cytoreason did. We took all the data and put it into disease models, put it all together into what we call the Cytoreason sphere. Now, a disease model is a very complex back end of our system, and it has different layers in it. So the first layer is public and proprietary information. So every couple of minutes, a new publication is released, and our NLP engine is able to capture that into our models. We also collaborate with pharma and biotech companies, so they share data with us, and that teaches our models with our algorithms. We look at different cells in the diseases, understanding which cells contribute to which disease and how they look like in the diseases. We look at different states of the same cell, so cells do not behave the same when they're in the beginning of their life cycle and later on. We look at the interactions between different cells, so cell to cell, cell to gene, gene to gene, to understand better the mechanism of the disease. We understand how the disease progresses and the trajectory of diseases. And we also see how diseases are reflected differently in different types of patients. So all these components put together our models. And as I said, we take a lot of different disease models, put it in our sphere, and that's the back end of our platform on which our scientists and our customer scientists are able to explore different diseases and also specific assets of our customers to understand those assets on disease landscape. So imagine that a pharma or biotech company can actually manage their scientific portfolio with our disease models. So different uses would be first understanding the mechanism of a disease, the mechanism of a drug, understanding what we can do, how we can direct specific drugs to the best diseases to get them as many responders in patients that we can get to. If the drug is in the market already, what can we do to expand the indications that the drug is used for? How can we can understand why certain people respond to that drug and why certain people do not, and how to change that maybe. And also talk about combinations, because we know that drugs are losing their effect over time. So combinations help us either strengthening the effect or preventing deterioration of the effect. And this has a lot of value both for pharma and for biotech companies. This is a nice timeline slide that really shows the Cytoreason story. So Cytoreason is a young company. It was established at the end of 2016. Early 17, we already had our first paying customer. It was the Parker Institute of Cancer Immunotherapy in San Francisco. 2018, we got our first multi-million, multi-year big deal with Big Pharma. That was with Pfizer, still bootstrap. 2019, we got our second big pharma customer. And it's also interesting to mention here that we also partnered on that year with Summit Pharma from the Sumitomo Group to help us open up to the Japanese market. In 2020, during the pandemic, we had a nice collaboration with Roche. Was stacking up with our previous collaborators. And 2021 was a real leap year for Cytoreason when we signed multiple contracts with multiple big pharma companies. So we have now Merck, Sanofi, Ferring Pharmaceuticals, another big pharma, and a market leader in the Japanese market. So looking at pharma and biotech together with CROs and payers, which we also have some pipeline solutions for, we're looking at a $10 billion market. We are already standing at 70 employees. Most of us have PhDs. So really combining big talents in Israel, biologists, bioinformaticians, data scientists to bring our customers the solutions that I just described. Just to give you an example on how it works, how a collaboration might work with our customers, I'll talk about something that was published by Pfizer. And this is about how they chose an indication for an asset that they have, an anti-CCR6 inhibitor. So they came to us with that asset. We used our platform to define the drug mechanism of action, then compare it across different diseases. This was done by our scientists, but today we are able to allow our customers to give their scientists our platform and analyze data and different opportunities with assets, either in preclinical stages or in clinical stages. And the result in this case was that Pfizer took our recommendation, shifted indication, and went to a clinical trial with our proposed indication. This is something we're very proud of. It seems like it's going very well for Pfizer, and both sides are very happy with this result. When we talk to our customers, we hear from their executives that when they're making big decisions with a lot of money involved, they like that they have data-driven approach. They have information they need for taking those decisions. It's more than statistics. It's more than recommendation. It's actual science that is driven by data. And I'll finish up with a nice quote that we had from Pfizer's head of immunology and inflammation, saying the difference between using Cytoreason technology and not using it is the difference between engineering and art. Thank you so much for inviting us today. Please reach out if you have any questions, thoughts, or ideas for collaboration, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Cytoreason, and it really was a very inspiring story. I'm just going to remind the audience that this was just a taste of what Israel has to offer. You can find many more opportunities either through your experience with ABeam or by sourcing them in the Startup Nation Finder, our free online tool which maps the whole of the Israeli tech ecosystem. And now for our last briefing. It is my honor and privilege to present Mr. Satoshi Tachibana, Principal, Head of DXI Sector Digital Technology Business Unit, ABeam Consulting, to speak on how to find value in the Israeli ecosystem. Mr. Tachibana.
サンクセイだ。そうしましたら、私の方からですね、最後のセッションになりますけれども、音声聞こえてますか？大丈夫ですか？画面もうちょっとですか？すいませんね。はい。最後のセッションをですね、進めさせていただきます。長丁場、皆さんお疲れ様です。ありがとうございます。本日はお集まりいただき、誠にありがとうございます。私の方からですね、コンサルティングファームから見た日系企業とディープテックスタートアップにおける競争のポイントということで、少し、15分程度ですかね、話をさせていただければと思います。4点のポイントになっておりまして、まずは簡単に弊社の紹介を簡単にさせていただきまして、競争実現までの壁っていうところと、本日もパネルディスカッションで出てたと思うんですけれども、その辺の内容もですね、同じようなポイントついてるかなと思うんですけど、そこから競争していくポイントっていうのはどういうところにあるのかという話ですね。あと最後にですね、弊社でできることっていうところを少しお伝えできればなというふうに思っております。会社紹介ですけれども、もしかしたら皆さんご存知かもしれないですが、細かなところはですね、ホームページ等々見ていただければと思うんですけれども、私が今率いている部門がですね、この下の方に書かれてますデジタル X イノベーションセクターを率いておりまして、さまざまな事業会社出身者からですね、もちろん本日のポイントであるスタートアップ関連も含めてですね、幅広くデジタルのですね、ビジネス、サービスの方を展開させていただいております。で、私の方もですね、イスラエルももちろん行ったことありますし、スタートアップネーションセントラルさんとはですね、本当にいろいろ協業できてありがたいというところまで、関係を作ることができております。スタートアップビジネスもそうですけれども、新規事業創造というところもですね、合わせて、幅広くやらせていただいております。早速、本題に行きたいなと思うんですけれども、こんな壁にぶつかっていませんかということで、本当に本日のテーマにもなってくる、前段かなと思うんですけれども、何かしら新しいことをですね、やれと言われてますという方たちが多分集まってるんじゃないかなとかですね、スタートアップをどうやって組んでいけばいいんだろうという悩まれている方たちも多いのかなと思うんですけれども、なかなかチャレンジしていくんですけどもうまく進まないっていう話、それは新規事業もそうですし、現場改善みたいなものもそうかなというふうに思います。で、本日のテーマであるディープテック、ディープテックと言われている分野ですけれども、スタートアップの分野になりますけれども、いくつか新しいビジネスやっていくとかですね、DX を進めていくっていった際に、課題がありますよねっていうところです。で、もう本当に今日出てる、なんでしょうね、ここで講演するまでもなくですね、パネルディスカッションでもほとんど出てるかなと思うんですけれども、事業上のシナジーっていうところもそうですし、最適な協業先の見極め、どうするべきかっていうところですね。で、ディープテックへの文化的な理解ですね、ここも大事ですよねと。で、もちろん、日本とイスラエルの違いっていうところも理解しなければいけないかなと。で、そうなってくると競争のポイントはこの3つになってくるかなと思うんですけれども、自社の強みと課題をですね、ぜひ共有してくださいと。で、皆さんそのイスラエルのディープテックに対してですね、共有してください。それをイスラエル側は待ってますと。なので日系企業の皆さんはそこからスタートするべきっていうふうに私もすごい思います。で、課題解決をやっぱり一緒にやっていくっていうことが非常に大事でして、これがコークリエーション、競争していくってことになるんですけれども、でその際には文化的な理解もそうですし、スタートアップのビジネスというものをちゃんと理解していかなければいけないというふうに思ってます。 でそこをですね、簡単にポイントをちょっとですね、皆さんと共有させていただければと思うんですけれども、自社の強みと課題を共有するっていうことは、自分たちが持っている課題をですね、さらけ出すっていうことになるんですけれども、もちろんそれだけではなくて、何をしたいと思っているかとか、こういう課題があるんで、なんとかしてこんな風な形で解決できないかとかですね。でそこで大事なのは、日系企業の中には、商品ですとか製品ですとか技術ですとか品質を改善する力ですとかアセットですとか、時には資金ですよね。これが非常に大事なポイントになってくるかなと、そこを意識しながらですね、共有していくと。なんでこれが言えるかというと、本日も話として一番最初のですね、イスラエルの今のスタートアップの現状っていうところからも読み解けるんですけれども、やっぱり日本っていう市場っていうのは魅力的ですと。意思決定が遅い日系企業って話はありましたけどもね、それに大企業と組めばアジア展開も期待できるっていうのが見られてる一つのポイントです。ジャパンブランドっていうのが日本にいるとですね、我々も意外と意識できなかったりするんですけれども、海外のマーケットからいくとですね、高い品質の証明とかですね、そういう要素として認知がすることもできますし、そこのアピールも一つできるのかなと。で中国企業は決断が早いが去るのも早いっていう比較する話でもないんですけども、この日系企業の場合はですね、やはり判断に時間かかる。だからイスラエルに拠点を置いて今日も出てましたけれども、スピードを持ってやるっていうことももちろん大事だと思いますし、それは非常に重要なポイントですけれども、決まると長く付き合えるっていうふうに見られているというところもですね、非常に大事なポイントかなと。我々もいろんな会社さんとお付き合いがあるんですけれども、やっぱ長く付き合えますよねっていうのは非常に我々としても手応えを持っている次第です。で最初の一社を見つけるのが大変っていうところですけれども、やはり前例主義でいくとなかなか難しいですねっていうところはあります。なので我々みたいなところを使ってくださいっていうところもあるんですけれども、この辺がポイントになってくるかなと。で2つ目のですね、課題解決で捉えるっていうところですけれども、本日出てましたけれども、日本には大きなポテンシャルがあるっていう、日系企業には大きなポテンシャルがあるっていうのと、ぜひリスクを取っていきましょうって話があったかなと思うんですけど、じゃあそこをですね、どういうメッセージに置き換えていくかっていうと、社会課題の解決とやっぱり産業構造、新たな産業創出、産業構造の紐解きをしながら新たな産業創出していく、そこに向けた課題解決っていうのがやっぱりポイントになるかなと。なので左側に書かせていただいているようなさまざまな問題に対してですね、もちろん自社の課題も含めてですけれども、合わせて課題解決にどういうふうにしていくんだっていうのが、コークリエーション、競争していく上での重要なポイントになってくるのかなというふうに思います。で今日も出ましたけども、産業をまたいでやる意味っていうのが私も非常に高くあると思っておりまして、いわゆる今勤められてるとか今、行われてる今自社に所属されている自社の産業だけを見るわけではなくて、それ以外の産業、周りの産業を見てそこと組み合わせていくと、非常にイスラエルのディープテックとの相性っていうのがより良くなっていくのかなというふうに我々としても思っております。でスタートアップビジネスの理解っていうところになるんですけれども、複数のユースケースの仮説検証を繰り返しながらっていうところを書かせていただいてますけれども、本日もパネルディスカッションでも出てたかなと思うんです。社会課題の解決と、いわゆる産業をまたぎながらですね、新しいことをやっていく、その上でディープテックを活用していく。で、それっていうのは業界またぐって話をしましたけど、そうすると今度はスピードを持ってやるっていう話にどう対応していくのってなると、仮説検証を繰り返していくということですね。これをいかに早く回していけるかっていうのがポイントなので、複数のユースケースをぜひ持ち出してですね、いわゆる一本足にならないような形で複数のユースケースで仮説検証を繰り返し回していく、素早く回していくっていうのが非常にポイントになってくる。で、次どうするんだってネクストアクションをですね、やっぱ考えておく必要があります。なのでステージ2以降って書いてますけれども、どういうふうにこれを拡張していくんだ、もしステージ1でうまくいくものがあればそれをどうやって伸ばしていくんだっていう話もですね、ぜひ思いとともにですね、一緒に競争していくと、一緒に対話をしていくとですね、会話をしていくと、ディープテックとの付き合いっていうのもですね、深くなっていくんじゃないかなというふうに、 なので、本日ですね、3つのポイントということで、挙げさせていただきましたけども、自社の強みと課題を共有していきましょうということと、課題解決ですね、いわゆる社会課題の解決、産業構造の課題解決っていうのも合わせてですね、で、スタートアップビジネスっていうものをちゃんと理解しながらですね、進めていくと、今日のパネルディスカッションでもあったテーマかなというふうに思っております。で最後にですね、少し、我々からの宣伝になりますけれども、こういったABeamコンサルティングみたいな会社をですね、どんな会社なんだっていうところももしかしたらおありの方もいらっしゃるかもしれませんが、いわゆる日本初のグローバルコンサルティングファームということで、いろんな海外の拠点の方たちとですね、競争する形を作れています。その一つ、我々が注力しているディープテック、スタートアップの集積地であるイスラエルっていうところとの組み合わせでのどんなビジネスができるのか、どんなビジネスを日系企業に対して支援できるのかということをですね、何年も繰り返しながら来ております。ですので、ビジネスアジェンダを考えるとかですね、どういう課題を解決していくのかを考えるのも我々もやってきてますし、もちろんエコシステムをどうやって活用していくんだと。いわゆる自分たちの文化っていうのが全て正しいわけではなくてですね、相手の文化っていうところもどこまで自分たちの中に取り入れていくかっていうのも非常に大事ですし、出来上がったものに対してインサイトを発信していくってことも非常に大事ですし、最後に我々としてもマルチインダストリーで事業化支援ということをやっております。特定のインダストリーにフォーカスしているわけではなくてですね、どのインダストリーに対しても我々はサービスを提供してきたっていう経験を持っています。ですので、多様なユースケースの創出っていうところにも寄与できると思いますし、インダストリーフリーの知見でできるんじゃないかなと。まさに、イスラエルのですね、ディープテックのこれからっていうところにですね、マッチングできるんじゃないかなというふうに思っております。スタートアップネーションセントラルの方たちとはですね、もう長らく、協業体制をですね、引かさせていただいてますし、開催できてですね、非常にありがたく思っております。で、そういったマッチアップもですね、我々も日系企業側面から、日系企業サイドからですね、ご支援することが可能ですので、ぜひお声掛けいただければと思います。で、その最後のページになりますけれども、競争活動支援としてですね、我々がどういうことをやってるかっていうアプローチを挙げておりますけれども、どんなディープテックがいるのっていうところをですね、一緒に探しましょうと。本当はコロナでなければっていうところがですね、あるんですけども、直接イスラエルに行ってですね、いろいろ見てくるっていうのも非常に大事なポイントになりますし、今はコロナ禍においてでもですね、こういったオンラインでできることもたくさん増えてきてますので、そういう中で探索していくっていうのも非常に大事なポイントかなと。で、武器としてはやはりユースケース、自社の強みと自社がどういう課題を解決したいんだっていうところも含めたユースケースの創出っていうところですね。で、それを我々も支援しております。で、そこからの POC ですね。どうやって POC につなげていくんだ。なかなかここに一つのハードルがあるんですけれども、そういったところのご支援もしております。で、そこから事業化していく際の支援ですね。これも本当に千差万別なんですけれども、我々もいろんなご支援の経験がありますので、ぜひこの辺もですね、お声掛けいただければと思います。で、最後に丸5って書いてるのがですね、これも一つ実はポイントになるんですけれども、自社にとってのですね、サービス、ソリューションとして提供していくことになる。いわゆる物売りからこと売りへとかよく言われますけど、サービスプロバイダーになっていくような側面っていうのが多分出てくると思います。そうなった際にサービスソリューションをどうやって作っていくんだっていうところもですね、合わせてご支援が可能となっております。本日は本当に長丁場の中ですね、我々のイベントにご参加いただきましてありがとうございます。ぜひ何かご懸念事項とかですね、課題、もしくは聞きたいこと等ありましたらですね、この後も QA ありますけれども、改めてこのメールアドレスとかにですね、問い合わせいただいて、ディスカッションするっていう機会も設けることができますので、ぜひよろしくお願いいたします。ご清聴ありがとうございました。Hi, Elena, please take the floor.
Thanks kindly to Mr. Tachibana. It has been an inspiring event with many moving parts, all designed to give you an insight into the value that Japanese multinational companies can find within the Israeli ecosystem of innovation. We hope that you've enjoyed our glimpse into the potential and look forward to creating many mutually beneficial business opportunities here in Israel together. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.